Good evening, everybody. Thank you to the wonderful organization of Forté for having us all here today. But before we start, let's have introductions. So Shivali, would you like to go first?
Sure. My name is Shivali Shah, and I actually am a director right now in management consulting at PwC. I actually did my undergrad and my grad school at the University of Michigan, Ross School of Business. So a lot of times I get asked, why pursue an MBA, and how did you get to your path? So I think about my story a little bit more like a choose your own adventure. My path started when I was about 16. So my first job in a retail store, it was very exciting, and I could hear the cash register ring, I could see the people smile walking out of there, and I knew it was my first taste of business, and I said, that's what I want to be in. So I started to pursue that in undergrad, and I joined actually during the summers and then also during the school year. I joined a couple of companies. So for example, one was Philip Morris, and also worked for a smaller company in a digital startup world to get a taste for marketing. And I realized that marketing was an interesting area, and I wanted to explore that further. So I took an offer with American Express, where I stayed on for a couple years working in the digital strategy arm. During that time, I started to see that the world was going global. And I said, I kind of want to go in that direction also. So I packed up 2 bags, left everything, and moved to Spain for a year. My parents thought I was absolutely nuts. So I went up there, and I actually went to study Spanish and also taught English to professionals. And during that moment, I started to figure out that, wow, culture has a huge impact on business, and this was something that was quite different than I'd ever experienced, and so I wanted to explore that further. So I moved from there and went actually to India, where I joined a small business, and I actually worked in textiles there and started to work with local artisans. And during that moment, I started to work with the artisans and the workers, and I started to realize another thing. A lot of these workers were working grueling hours, yet not having enough pay for even education or even for their food for their family. And so I started interest in something called microfinance, and that's an area, for those of you who don't know, where folks actually get loans to people in poverty to actually go start their own business. And so I called the company close to Bangladesh, on the border of India, and I sold them, and I said, you know what, I want to go learn a little bit about this industry. I'll give you my consulting tricks for if I can at least learn about the industry. So I spent the next 8 months in the field learning and understanding the social side of business. And so that was another perspective I was able to gain. And as I was going through that, I realized that I wanted to be close to like-minded people, and I wanted to really start expanding my skills in a new way. And so that's where I decided at that point to actually go pursue my MBA, and down that path I went. So it's a little bit about my background.
Thank you. Frida?
Hi. Sorry. My name is Frida Polly. You're going to have to forgive me. I've been up really early, and I went to bed really late, so I'm a little bit low energy tonight. But so my story is a little different. I went to undergrad at Dartmouth, and during that time figured out that I was interested in studying the brain. And after a couple years working as a research assistant, I decided to get a PhD in neuroscience. So I did that and worked in academic neuroscience for about a decade as a pre-doc and then as a postdoc in the Harvard and MIT systems. And that's not a typical background for somebody to then go get an MBA. And I think that's part of why I'm on the panel tonight, is just to discuss why somebody like myself, who had been a scientist for a long time, would choose to get an MBA and the value of that. But I did, and I went to HBS and graduated last year, and after that founded a tech startup that uses the science background that myself and my co-founder have to apply some of the assessment and analytics tools that we used to use in the lab and in the healthcare clinic to assess people's cognitive strengths and weaknesses for the purpose of helping people find their optimal career fit. So that's me in a nutshell. And I think if you guys have any questions about why somebody would want an MBA after having done lots and lots of years of other schooling, the value of that, or anything related to career changing, work-life balance. I also have an 8-year-old. Happy to answer any of those questions. So,
I think those are all coming. I can give you a preview. They're on my list. All right, Jessica?
Thanks. So my name is Jessica Capadia. I actually went to NYU undergrad. NYU, if I'm being alumni. And then I actually went to Indiana University for my MBA. So I studied economics and Middle Eastern history at NYU. I've always been really fascinated with culture, the global aspect, same as was mentioned earlier. I started off my career in fixed income shop, Schenkman Capital Management, working in high yield bonds. So I was a strategist there. It seems I've always liked solving puzzles. So I was working in the strategy department at the fixed income shop. Loved my job. Soon as the housing bubble started to slowly fizzle, I decided to take a year off as well. I kind of packed up my things and just started traveling. Bought a one-way ticket, wanted to see as much as I possibly could, and really decided that I wanted to get an MBA. I really wanted to start seeing the other aspects of business I didn't know. Because you can imagine in a fixed income shop, you're really focused in on bonds, and that's about it. So decided to travel for a year, found out that I had gotten into Indiana University. I was actually a Forté Fellow there. Got a fantastic education, and then jumped into consulting. I was doing global consulting for a long time with Nike, Pepsi, and GE Healthcare. I've done business in probably 15 different countries. Really taking the year off to travel, understanding the different cultures and the malleability that you need to do business in different countries was really valuable to me. And now I'm actually doing internal consulting for Deloitte LLP. So if you have any questions on just why get an MBA, especially, they did pretty traditional, going from asset management to consulting, but, just broadening your horizons and self-betterment, it was really the reasons I went back, so I can always talk to that.
Great. And then I think Rupali jumped in on the end down there.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Rupali Monga. I did my undergrad at Baruch College in the city. Over there, I concentrated in finance investments, did a minor in political science. After graduating from Baruch, I joined Merrill Lynch's Risk and Compliance Analyst program. I was at Merrill Lynch for 3 years. I spent 6 months in their global securities research, risk and compliance, and then moved on to anti-money laundering, and then completed the program in investment banking, risk and compliance. At that time, when I was completing the program, is when Merrill got acquired by Bank of America, so you can imagine there was a lot of changes going on in the company, but I was fortunate enough to land a permanent full-time position in their global wealth and investment management branch exams group. So what I did there was I traveled to our wealth management branch offices throughout the United States to conduct internal compliance and risk exams to make sure that our financial advisors were complying with firm regulations, industry policies, and ultimately that there was no fraudulent activity going on in our clients' accounts. So at that time, there was a lot of change going on in the financial service industry. I know you spoke to that a little bit. I had decided that I wanted to change. I didn't see a lot of growth in the particular area that I was in, and also I wanted to just expand my network, kind of transition more to the front end of the business, learn more about business itself. So I decided to get my MBA. At that point, I joined the University of Rochester Simon Graduate School of Business, also part of the consortium. So I went to Simon through the consortium. Had a fantastic 2 years there. I concentrated in marketing and organizational strategy. I did my internship at Abbott Nutrition, brand management internship, working on their Similac infant formula brand. So a bit of a different experience there. Studied abroad for 3 months, went to Mexico City, traveled to 6 different countries in Latin America. It was a phenomenal experience. Definitely expanded my network internationally. Then I decided that I wanted to do something different. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I just wanted to do something different. So I joined AT&T's Leadership Development Program. And pretty much that's a general management track. It's a fast track to their executive leadership team, where you have the opportunity to really learn about different areas of AT&T's businesses. You get to take on supervisory roles, project management roles, and just have a lot of exposure to their senior management team. So I completed my first rotation. It's a 2.5-year program, and I'm in my second rotation now, and will complete the program in another 1.5 years or so. After that, it really just depends. But if you have any questions about making a career change, why get your MBA, or anything along those lines, I'd be happy to discuss that.
Great. Shivali, I'm going to start with you. You talked a lot about your travels around the world and sort of your shifting interests, while there were some common themes. What finally drove your interest specifically in going back to business school?
I think it's really two things. First is the ability to make people happy. Again, as I talk about my first job, it was amazing when someone would walk in stressful into the store, and within 30 minutes they'd walk out with that exact piece that they were imagining. And so for me, in that business context, it's how do you identify what a customer wants, and then how do you actually deliver on that, whether it's a product or service. So that was one thing that was really important to me that has come clear throughout my experiences. And I think the second thing was really impacted by the whole microfinance experience was how can you help non-traditional entities really grow and scale? As I mentioned, I was working in that field, and one of the biggest issues was that there was a gap in senior management or even middle managers to be able to scale and sustain a business. And so for me, I wanted to gain those skills, and my goal, in the future is to bring that back. Currently, in what I'm doing right now in corporate, but I'm picking up a lot of those skills in terms of what I do is a lot to do with the brain as well. I do a lot of psychology in terms of understanding what consumers want and then how to motivate the proper behavior. And so my goal is to bring that then back to health and education. So those are the two things that really rung for me.
Excellent. And Jessica, I know you touched a little bit on this, but can I ask you the same question, because you come from a pretty different background? Can you offer your perspectives on your decision to go to business school?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the big reasons that I went back to business school, I was working in asset management, and I decided that it was really about self-betterment for me. Like, I wanted to learn as much as possible. And when I went back to business school, one of the things that I really focused in on is how can I take the skill sets that I have of I'm a big people person, I love being around just everyone with a global mindset, and how can I bring that to not only better myself, but better the people around me. So I really started to dive deep into strategy when I got into business school. I used my skill set actually to work on the electric vehicle project for Toyota Motor Sales during my internship, and I actually also did a stint in Nicaragua working at a solar panel installation shop. So it was taking not only my ability to really solve problems, but bringing that to other people and then doing that internally for Deloitte LLP now is just what I really love to do, and that's why I chose to go back, is for the self-betterment piece.
Excellent. And Frida, I'm going to come to you next, because as someone, as you said, that comes in with a sort of a unique perspective and chose not to go into banking or consulting after business school, can you offer a perspective for those in the room that aren't looking to go into sort of those two major tracks after? What is the value in an MBA for someone that isn't looking to do that?
Sure. So I guess there's two parts to that question. I think that for somebody like myself that wasn't coming from a traditional background, I think that the value of an MBA is huge. People, at least other scientists, were a little bit skeptical. They're like, why do you want to go get an MBA? You may have heard this, but some people are skeptical of the value of an MBA. I mean, I'm just saying, some people, I don't know. And they're like, it's just a bullshit degree, blah, blah, blah. And I really would completely argue against that. I think that I didn't know what an income statement, balance sheet was. I had never taken a marketing class. I didn't know the 4 or 5 Ps, depending on where you go. I learned a tremendous amount. And I think that for somebody who comes from a non-traditional background like myself, the value of an MBA is enormous. From the classes perspective alone, I think it was incredible. And then obviously from the people that you meet, whether it be fellow students or professors, they have been invaluable to building the business that we built out of HBS. So I am the gospel of you should go to get an MBA if you have never worked in business before. In terms of not choosing banking or consulting, I wasn't super tempted, I have to say. And maybe that's just because, I don't know, my dad worked for McKinsey for his whole life, and he loved it, and good for him. I kind of saw the pitfalls of the consulting lifestyle. And it was actually funny, I went through consulting interviews, because I was like, I didn't know what else to do, and I was like, well, consulting at least will buy me a few years until I really have to figure out what I want to do. I was too old to be thinking that way anyways, but I was like, whatever. And so you do the case study, and I did really well in the case study, and I was like, oh great, I'm going to get a second round interview, whatever. And they called me, and they're like, really sorry, we can't pass you along. And I was like, well, why? I mean, like I did the math piece, and they're like, yeah, but we could just tell from your answers to the behavioral questions that you weren't going to be like very amenable to if a client like didn't agree with your perspective. And I was like, and at first I was crushed. I was like, wow, like I should have prepped for the behavioral piece. Like, why didn't I do that? And then I was like, you know what? That's so true. Like, I would make a horrible, horrible consultant because I wouldn't be very. I have opinions about stuff, so I think that like it might come through. Anyways, that's not to say that consulting isn't a great lifestyle. I really think it is. I think it's just
We're not allowed to have opinions.
No, I didn't mean that in a bad way. I meant what I'm sorry.
No, I'm not
on a panel of consultants. I'm sorry. I just mean that I am definitely somebody that I really apologize. I hope I didn't offend anyone.
You did.
I'm kidding. Really, what I meant to say was that I wasn't tempted because I knew myself well enough to know that I prefer to just do, and as opposed to try to be more subtle and convince other people, of the rightness of an analysis. Anyways, long story short, I wasn't super tempted by banking or consulting, and either by sort of the work necessarily that I thought was involved in that, or also from a lifestyle perspective. I went to business school and I had a 5-year-old at the time. And I just knew that I needed something with more flexibility than sort of, if I was going to take an entry-level consulting or finance role, that was another sort of, thing that I didn't think was going to work super well for me. So I definitely think there's a huge number of people coming out of business school programs now that don't want to go into the more traditional career paths. And I think, I think that's great. I think that you can definitely use an MBA in a really productive and useful way, whether you want to go do a tech startup or whether you want to do something that's not within those two different roles. I think there is a lot of value to it. And I think, again, I co-founded a company. Certainly don't think that I could have done it without the skills that I learned in business school or the people that I met, the network that I grew there. And just even, this is going to sound silly because what does it, again, like, do you really know about business from having done 2 years in business school? Probably not, but it does sort of give you, I think for career changers like myself who needed that sort of validation of like, well, somebody thought I had some like iota of business sense. I think that it does provide you with that, stamp of approval, so to speak.
The only thing I would add is someone who, I studied business undergrad, but a very different kind of business undergrad, and then the practical application of what you do in business school is very different than a lot of what you study undergrad. Right. The casework, the teamwork, it's a lot more like the real world, what you're doing in a very concentrated form. Rupali, one of the things that you commented on was the role that you got that you're in now since business school is a development role. And so want to understand or get your thoughts on how your MBA has helped you transition and progress your career and the flexibility that it has offered you.
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the biggest learnings for me during my MBA was time management. I know that sounds a little silly, but it's really true. Because before business school, you're working and it's great. You have a good job and you do what you have to do. During business school, there's a lot of things that you're juggling, right? Especially, it depends on you too, like how much you want to get involved, if you're in leadership roles, if you're taking courses, and if you don't have a business background or financial, finance, math background, that's another kind of extra piece of work that you have to like invest in, and all sorts of activities, right? So for me, that was a really big learning. Also, the network, just doing presentations, a lot of just kind of building your business acumen. I think that was really helpful for me because in my prior role, I was very siloed into compliance and regulatory. I knew what I had to get done and I got it done, and that was that. This definitely broadened my horizons on understanding the marketing aspect, the operations aspect, all that stuff. And in this role, the role that I'm currently in the development program, that's exactly what we do, right? So my first rotation, I was a network operations manager. I managed a team of technicians who troubleshoot T1 circuits. I have no technical background. I didn't know anything about T1 circuits or operations or anything of that sort. So when I first went into that role, it was a very big learning curve for me, but I knew I could do it, because I did it in business school. I kind of had that confidence. I was like, I'll get it done. So that helped in that regard. And a lot of project management there from an operations side, touches some marketing pieces. Then I ended up working in a digital video center, developing comprehensive processes for troubleshooting and provisioning software. Again, totally different, right? So just adding to my skills and making sure that's under my belt. In my current role, I'm a project manager in our Advanced Mobility Solutions product and offer team. So pretty much what we do is we make sure that any emerging products that are launched, that we have all of the customer care pieces intact. Our goal is to make sure that our customers have a good customer experience with us, right? So it's really understanding everything that goes into a product launch, right? So again, the MBA helped me in that regard because it helped me understand, because I don't have a marketing background, right? So this is really building on my marketing skills. If I didn't have that MBA experience, if I didn't really take all my brand management courses or advertising and all that, this would be a little bit more challenging for me. So it helped me in that regard. And then also, you know, in the next couple of months, I'm going to be managing a team of project managers, right? So in that regard, I'm learning more because your MBA kind of gives you the knowledge and the education and the network. You don't really get a lot of like management experience unless you take specific courses. But again, you know, I know that it's going to be a new space for me, and it's not something that I have a lot of experience in. But getting the education, kind of building my network, and just taking on different projects, you know, makes me feel confident that I'm going to be able to utilize those skills in other roles. So again, it's just a diverse experiences. You know, that's really what it comes down to. And without an MBA, it would be very hard to transition into a role like that when you're so used to being a part of a silo program.
Excellent. Jessica, can you comment on the opportunities that you had through your MBA to give back to the community, volunteer, and perhaps what your MBA, either during business school or since business school, has, you know, afforded you in terms of giving back to the community?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the big projects that I took on is I actually supported an organization called, it was in Nicaragua, it was about 10 miles from the Honduran border, and it was called Suni Solar in Sabana Grande. And what the organization did, it supported women within the local community. So I lived in a community, there was no running water, and electricity was only provided by solar panels that they had installed themselves. So it was a really fantastic experience. One of the big things that I did with my MBA, and just with my business background, and not only at Schenkman Capital, but in my other roles, was provided like basic business skills. Like, how do you market your product? So one of the things that they were doing was they were roasting coffee beans with solar panels, and they were selling that. Who did you sell to? Who's your market? How do you promote it? So we really taught these women just basic grassroots. How do you develop a business? So it kind of goes back to the microfinance piece, but you know, how do you create a sustainable, ongoing revenue stream? How do you manage your costs? How do you allocate your hours? Just basic things that, you know, they didn't really think through. And we started to take a really long process to that. We started off with the fundamentals, and then ever since I got back to the US, we've just been touching base every month. We do Skype calls and really kind of find out what are the business issues they're having and how can we help them. And I mean, I do this on my free time, so it's not something that, you know, but it gives me such enjoyment. Like, you can really take the skills you learn about not only time management, but the technical skills, and give it back to the community in different forms and different ways. So,
one of the things that's been really valuable to me is my network. Can you comment on the benefits or the value of the network?
While I was at school, I was tapping into the network, both alumni as well as regular, just to find out what were opportunities in terms of business programs going on, in terms of partnerships. And no joke, to this day, every 2 weeks I get an email from either alum or someone who's a current student right now from my program, asking questions or wanting to talk. And that, again, I think speaks volumes, and it's people that I don't even know. But the minute I see my alma mater and I see that it's, you know, from my business program, I pick up that phone. So I think that, again, when you think about what are you paying for, that's one of the huge investments that I would think about. Again, not looking necessarily just at ratings of schools, but where are you going to best thrive? Where is that network going to be best for you and support you for where you want to be? And I highly suggest thinking about that, because I think a lot of times people get wrapped up in rankings and ratings, but you really should feel it and touch it, and if you feel that energy, that's something that you should really consider.
The concept of balancing a career and a family, it's a challenge. Love to get your thoughts on how you do that, and how your choice to get an MBA has either helped and supported you in that objective.
Now I feel like I have 10 times the option set that I did before, and by definition, options gives you flexibility, and I do strongly believe what Sheryl Sandberg wrote about in her book, which is that I think the key to balancing a family and work is having flexibility. I think it's really tough to do in professions or careers where there's not that type of flexibility. So that, I think, was the biggest incentive for me of spending 2 years in an MBA program, after having done as much schooling as I'd already done, and then being told I was too opinionated. So I think it was totally worth it, because I think it just really opened up so many potential avenues for how I could apply my previous skill set that otherwise would have been much, much harder to pursue.
So I think with that, I'm going to invite you to come to the microphones if you have questions from the room.
3 years ago, I was actually in this room at a Forté event deciding whether or not I should get an MBA, and my answer was no. And the reason why I came to that conclusion was because I thought I was going into a startup. So I started 2 startups and failed. And one of the reasons why I decided not to was because I was just like, if I'm going to spend $150,000 on an education, would I rather put in this $150,000 in school or $150,000 in the business? So I guess for everyone who, or I guess just Frida, because you're the only person that didn't go into corporate, how? So I guess, can you delve a little deeper into the value outside of just the things that you learned, but maybe on the social aspect, the network, blah, blah, blah?
I actually think that we wouldn't be nearly as far along as we are if I hadn't gone to get an MBA. We got almost all of our clients through case protagonists that were done at HBS, business school classmates of mine introducing me to the head of recruiting here and the head of HR there. When we were looking to raise money, the investors that are investing in us, again, was a case study that we did in business school, and I don't think necessarily they would have, I know for a fact they probably wouldn't have taken the meeting if I hadn't gone to the same business school as them. Obviously we were fundable, but I think the ease of getting that meeting, which if you ever fundraise for a startup is, it's a huge ordeal. I think that was key. And then I think that, the third piece of it was just the fact that the advice that I was able to draw from. We were constantly put in situations where we were meeting with either other investors or, when we were negotiating the terms of the deal, it's amazing. The professor that taught entrepreneurial finance took my phone calls on his vacation in Utah every day and would sit there and talk to me for, 15 minutes or whatever as to whether I should negotiate this term or not. So I'm not joking when I say that I think we would never have gotten as far as we have. And again, we're early days, but I think we're a good startup, but I think that the fact that we had access to all these things was the difference between being successful versus not.
I have the school selection conversation a lot. I talk to a lot of, teary first round applicants, and I feel like I go through the admissions process 15 times a year. And the things that people don't tell you is geography matters sometimes, especially if your family, your husband, your children, other things are here and you want to stay here. Don't feel like you're being silly. There are good options everywhere. The other thing for me, and I think for everybody, is thinking about what the program offers very specifically. So there are professors, right? If you're interested in microfinance, there's a professor at MIT who's famous for his work in microfinance, right? So you can think about the specific things that you might want to get out of a program. So for me, I wanted to find a school that had a really great part-time program, and I wanted to stay in the New York area, and I wanted to go to a top-tier business school. And so I applied to a few schools in the New York area, and I went to visit Stern, and it felt good to me. And I met a couple professors, and they were really easy and approachable, which was important to me. So that was a big part of my process.
two different things also for me that rung. One is I wanted a school with that gave me practical experience. So I went to Michigan, and one of their big programs is called the MAP program. So part of that was the MAP program, where for 6 weeks after, at the end, you actually get practical exposure. So that for me was very important to be able to consult and use my skills. But additionally, there was a new product development course. For again, I was interested in entrepreneurial areas, so was able to develop a product from day one with what was the actual product, and then actually sell it in a trade show. So again, that aspect for me was really important, and I felt that that school gave it to me. And the second big thing is I wanted to find a school that was balanced, not just within the business program, but also had other grads programs, so I could see speakers and also meet a variety of different students. So again, that was an important part of my criteria set as I was thinking about schools.
So I have a little bit of a different story. So I went to NYU undergrad, and I spent 10 years in New York City. And when I was thinking about business school, I'm all about life experiences. I want to broaden my horizons. I wanted to learn as much as possible. And I had I had a really nice broad global perspective. I had lived in an urban environment, and one of the big things I wanted about a business school was I wanted to be in a different environment, and I wanted to have the best classroom experience that I could. I wanted to find the best professors, the best classroom experience. So that's how I started to actually go down the list of schools. So I applied to 5 or 6 different schools, and when I went out to Indiana, it was a really different experience for me. I had never been to the Midwest other than Chicago. And I went out there, and they had the most fantastic professors, and the classrooms, like, it just had a really good feeling over it. And the people and the individuals in my class were so different from my background. There was actually only 2 or 3 different people from the East Coast, and most people were from the Midwest. So it was fantastic because I got to really broaden my horizons in a different way. Not only did I get a fantastic education, but I also really got to understand and listen to the perspectives of people that I would never have encountered otherwise. And I have to tell you, so when I went to business school, I'd gone to NYU, so I was like 19 drinking martinis in New York City at NYU, and I went out to Indiana, and I went to my first tailgate, and I showed up in stilettos and a really cute little outfit, and everyone just looked at me like, what are you doing here? So I learned a lot, not only in the classroom, but outside the classroom too. And it really, getting an MBA, it's all about the network, but it's the people that you meet give you so much. And you not only learn stuff in the classroom, but you learn so much outside the classroom about people's experiences and where they want to go and why they want to go there. And that really helps you solidify where you're going to go.
The reason why I decided to go to the Simon School of Business, there were a couple of reasons. One is I went there for a site visit, and I just loved everyone I spoke to. It's a very small knit program compared to a lot of other MBA programs, so it depends on your preference, right? Do you want to build, do you want to be part of a smaller network where you have really strong connections? Do you want to be part of a bigger program? So that's your preference. Also, their curriculum, right? So Simon's program is actually very quantitative. That's their key selling point. They're very strong in finance. And even their marketing, even though I have a finance background, even their marketing is very much based on numbers. It has strategy too, but it's very quantitative in nature. So I wanted to continue to build on that a little bit. I like that aspect. And then lastly, I ended up getting a full scholarship. So financial considerations are very, very important, right? When you're making the ultimate choice, rankings and ratings are very important too, but you got to determine, if you're getting a full ride as well, is that something that's, means a lot to you and is going to help you in the long run. So those are just a couple of reasons.
I've been a professional stage manager in theater for 7 years, so I am completely out of the business world, and I'm looking at this vast pool of schools, and I don't know really how to narrow it. So I understand all of the considerations that you took into picking your school, but how do you even narrow it down, and how many schools did you apply to when you were going through that process?
I had roughly looked at around 5 to 10 schools. So I went to the MBA Forum. That was where I started, and I essentially went to their half-hour sessions to all the different 10 schools that I was thinking about. Mm-hmm. And I came to that set of 10 through reading ratings and rankings and reading student reviews and things like that. And from that forum, I actually was able to narrow it down to roughly about 4 schools. Because again, within that half hour, you get to interact with the staff, you get to see how they handle the presentation, you get to see what type of other students there and what other questions, and that gives you a really good gauge. At least for me, I felt it was a pretty strong gauge. And I wasn't even considering, for example, Michigan at all in that set. I happened to go to their session, and I was like, this is kind of interesting. And that's the whole reason why I even opened up my set to Michigan to begin with. So that's where I started my quest. Once I had that information, then I actually went to each of actually the admissions directors, and I got names from students. And so I started basically finding out about information electronically, at least interacting with current students and even actually professors. I reached out to some of them. Based on that, I was able to narrow it down then to probably around a selection of 2 schools that I really felt were strong and aligned with what I wanted to do. And so I did site visits. I basically went to conferences. I made sure that there was going to be a large conference where alum going to be there, also professors and students, and I went to 2 major conferences in these different schools, and that's how I made my final decision. So a little bit different process, but I was very hands-on in terms of talking to the actual student body.
And I'm just going to add some this is my thought process when I was going to school. I asked myself the questions like, what do I really love? I love interacting with people. I love working on teams. I love, being in an environment where I'm being challenged and learning as much as possible. I didn't know that I was going to go into consulting, but I knew that before I went back to business school. So knowing that really helped, in my own head, facilitate the discussion. Okay. So I know I like these things. What are the skill sets I want to acquire? I was really strong in finance. I didn't know anything about operations. I didn't know anything about marketing. So I wanted to make sure I got those aspects into my portfolio, right? So you have to ask yourself the questions. It's like, what is it that I love? You don't need to know the answer, but you need to ask yourself, what is it that I love? What is it that I want to be in my future? And I have all that now. I manage people. I interact with clients. Like, it'll naturally fall into place, but make sure you have that answered internally for yourself. That's my best. I think that's how I did it. So it's my best advice.
My name's Katie. I have sort of a non-traditional background as well. I've been at 2 startups that have been successful so far. For me, it's very at the company that I'm at now. I foresee a pretty long future, a pretty great future with them. So it's very scary to think about leaving the workforce for, 2 years. It's very, very scary to me. So I'm considering part-time, and so I was wondering if that was something that factored into your decision. Did you consider full-time, part-time? Do you feel like if you did part-time versus full-time, did you lose out on something? Like, I'm just curious to get your perspective on that.
For me, I was I wasn't at a startup, but standing at the edge of, I don't really want to take 2 years out of the workforce right now. And it was as much a financial decision as it was just an emotional decision that I was just, and in hindsight, I'm really glad I did it, because when I went to business school, the market sort of went, and getting a job after that would have been really, really difficult. So for me, the decision to go part-time was very much just a personal comfort level with taking time out of the workforce and my commitment to the time that it would take, because it's a pretty big time commitment. And knowing that there were programs where I could get an equivalent degree, or where I felt that I could get an equivalent degree that would give me, because as a lot of people have said, for me, the biggest reason that I got an MBA was around future flexibility. The idea to have the opportunity to have options and to choose my future. I didn't go in like Jessica thinking that I was going to be a consultant coming out of business school. That wasn't my stated objective. But by the time I was done business school, I knew that's where I wanted to go. But for me, it was, as you said, as much that like emotional decision of really enjoying what I was doing at work, being able to feel that I was going to get an equivalent experience, and finding a program that fit for me. The one sacrifice that I did make is the opportunity to have an internship in the summer, which in hindsight I'm comfortable with, because I was getting a work experience as it was, and I was able to do something different after school. But I will say that as I talk to a lot of current MBAs and recent MBAs, the summer experience is a really interesting one, and something that having a specific internship experience is pretty interesting, pretty cool. Usually get some really great opportunities to do something a little bit different. And I know that our analysts that go back, and a lot of other schools have programs like this, actually allow you to do what we call as an externship. So before you leave for school, our analysts actually can take up to 3 months and go do something else. A paid internship, and working for a not-for-profit, doing something different before, and then they also get an internship experience between their first and second year. So I will say that you do trade that off.
I wanted to add something to that. I think it's really important for you to know if you're considering part-time, if you want to stay in the field that you're in or grow in the company that you're in, and you know getting an MBA will help you get there, then I think it's a great decision, right? But if you are thinking about making a career change, you know, as Nicole has mentioned, she mentioned, was that one of the biggest benefits of also a full-time MBA is that you get the opportunity to do a 3-month internship and test out the field that you potentially want to go in, right? So if you're working, you can't do that, right? Or it's really hard to. I mean, maybe you can, but I think it's really hard to. So that's something that you want to think about beforehand. You know, do I want to make a career change? If you want to do something completely different, then maybe the full-time may be a better option. If you want to just stay at the startup and, you know, getting an MBA is going to help you go up the ranks the way you want to, then maybe part-time would be a good choice. So that's just a couple of things that you want to think about.
If you do want to stay where you are and you're interested in continuing, you should look very introspectively at what the MBA is going to get you where you are, and make sure that you are going to get, you know, a solid return on that, because it's a lot of effort. It's not, you know, and you know, it is nights and weekends technically in terms of the times and days, but it's not just a hobby. It's a lot of effort that you give of yourself. So you want to make sure that you're going to get the commensurate return if you're planning to stay where you are.